Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It's a brand new episode of Bets and Banter. This week on the show, we're going over none other than UFC Vegas 107, Erin Blanchfield, Coldblooded, the pride of Northeast, right? We got New York, New Jersey, well represented this week in the main event. On the other side, we've got Maycee, the future Barber. She's looking to round into her first title opportunity, and it could be on the other side of an Erin Blanchfield win if she's able to get it. Title eliminator at women's 125, and a lot of other interesting fights to break down as well along the way. You know that we can't go it alone, guys. On Bets and Banter, we're always coming with a great guest. And this week, it's none other than the guy you know, the guy you love. He's back in the saddle once again. Wizz MMA. How are you, my brother?
We're ready. We're ready to be back in action. I've been deprived of some good UFC. I know we had Road to UFC over the weekend, and MMA is MMA. I get it. But there's quite a difference from watching the regional side to the Road to UFCs, to the Dana White Contender Series of the world. It's just different when you're so used to watching a higher level of martial arts compared to, the up-and-comers. So I'm glad to have a show on this weekend, glad to break down these fights, and happy to do it again with you, Liam. So let's get this thing started.
Absolutely, brother. Couldn't have put it better myself. I think that it was good to have a week off. We've been running hot and heavy with these UFC events, but now we're right back into the swing of things. We got a UFC card this weekend. We've got a UFC pay-per-view event to round us into June. So very excited so far this year, my man. It's been really good at the betting window, and Lord willing, we can keep that rolling, right? We never let our highs get us too high. We never let our lows get us too low. Always right back to work, and we have a fresh new set of opportunities this week. So without further ado, let's get into it in earnest. First fight of the night, we've got low-level women's MMA. No disrespect here, but that's just calling it like I see it. Rayan dos Santos on the one side. Wiz, I'll be truthful, man. I think she should be 2-0 in the UFC. Pretty brutal runouts for her, right? She goes out there and kind of loses a couple nip-tuck decisions. Tell you the truth, the Alencar fight, I thought she clearly won the first round. I thought she did a lot of damage as well in the first round, which kind of surprised me on rewatch. Round two, gave up a takedown, kind of boneheaded, good guard retention, but ultimately conceded that round, I think, by laying on her back to end it. And then you see round three, she comes back out, and it's pretty tepid striking, but Talita Alencar is just not a very effective striker. And, oftentimes it's just to facilitate her grappling. So when she wasn't able to have much success in that phase, kind of thought Rayan dos Santos had done enough there. I thought she had landed more damaging strikes as well. And ultimately the judges didn't see it that way. You look at that fight against Pooja Tomar. I haven't gotten a chance to rewatch it. I'm not sure if that was one of the fights that ended up on the ESPN chopping block. But ultimately, Pooja is kind of, like a Shauna Bannon in a sense where they both like to fight from the outside, throw a lot of kicks, not engage in too many, pocket boxing exchanges, so to speak. But when you saw Shauna Bannon commit to her offense against Elise Ardelean, frankly, she was landing with impunity. And, Elise Ardelean kind of got beat up in that fight. Shauna Bannon doesn't have that much pop, that much power. We've seen her go to decision. We've seen her get popped by Pooja Tomar and pull out an armbar from the bottom. And one thing I noticed, Elise Ardelean does go for takedowns. She looks for the top position. I just don't think she's a very good grappler. I don't think she's very sound, very seasoned, clearly not very experienced either. She's talked about that, basically coming into some of these fights with really no wrestling and grappling experience early on. So she's made some improvements, but ultimately I think time on the mat, skills on the mat, it's not going to be close in my opinion. I think Rayan dos Santos looks like a grappler. Her takedown defense against Talita Alencar was on point. Is she a proactive enough wrestler and grappler to justify her price? That's where I would kind of come away saying, not really. She has the ability to mix in her wrestling and grappling, I feel. In this matchup in particular, I think it would be really, really stupid not to. But I just don't think she's a very reliable fighter to go out and follow a good process. Now, the thing is, she's 29 years of age. She's now got her feet wet in the UFC. Frankly, she's been robbed blind. So a chip should be developing on her shoulder, you would have to imagine. The health is a concern, I think, coming in here. I've heard some rumors that she may be hurt her arm, in the last year. So that's something that would definitely give me a little bit of pause here. But ultimately, this is the kind of fight where there's a few things that stand out to me, Wiz, and I'm about to kick it to you. But the first thing I noticed here, the fight not to go the distance is a really big price. And you've got two women here. The vast majority of their wins inside the distance. Are they immune to putting themselves in bad positions? I don't think so. Are they doing a great job of not getting hit? In the case of Elise Ardelean, absolutely not. So I just think when you look at the dynamics of this fight, I think Elise Ardelean basically has no defense standing her on the ground. I think she's got some enthusiasm and some offense on the feet. I think Rayan dos Santos is a little bit spotty on the feet at times. I don't really like how she reacts to getting hit, but I just think her striking process is way better. I think she'll probably land more and harder shots in this fight. And frankly, if she can't submit this girl, I say this with all due respect, she should retire from mixed martial arts. Like, I don't know what the future is if you come in with a BJJ black belt and you can't submit girls like Elise Ardelean, who are frankly play and pretend a little bit as fighters, right? Like a girl who has done all the work to get herself in shape and show up and really try and maximize these opportunities, but she's 9-7 as a professional, right? She's not even produced a very meaningful winning record. She's never beaten an opponent of substance in her career. And I think there's been less promise in her UFC fights than Rayan dos Santos, because truthfully, I just don't think Elise Ardelean has shown me anything except anger and enthusiasm and, a willingness to throw. I really don't think she's very talented. Whereas on the other side, Rayan dos Santos is like a very frustrating watch. She didn't get finished by Denise Gomes. It's like Denise Gomes clearly has some power, some enthusiasm, and ability to take women out. So I think Rayan dos Santos at her best is much better than Elise Ardelean, but she just is an underperformer throughout her career. So for me, it's a dog or pass situation on the money line, but honestly, I'm more interested in some of the finishing props, and try and lean into either Rayan is hurt coming into this one and doesn't look like herself and is maybe ready to call it a career, or she comes out and dominates this girl on the ground like she really should if she wants to be a UFC level fighter. Wiz, how do you see this one going down, my man?
Yeah, you couldn't have broke it down any better, to be honest with you. Like, I didn't do too much research on this fight for the sole reason that I just really couldn't care about it any less. There really isn't much to say. I mean, Alice Ardelean, famous TikTok star, turned a pro MMA fighter, 9-7 pro record, not really good at anything, just really not terrible at a lot of things, and that's not saying much. So she just squeaks by these fights, and obviously it shows in the record. You look at Amanda dos Santos, who, I've been on the wrong side with her twice now, unfortunately. Against Pooja Tomar, I think obviously she won, and judges were just blind that night, I guess. So I ate a really bad one there. And then against what's her name? Why am I forgetting the
Talita Alencar.
Talita. Against Talita, I was just yelling at my screen like, what is going on? Top 5 worst fights of all time, in my opinion, with number 1 being Rosa Esparza. But Amanda dos Santos got to be in that top 5 against Alencar. But all that to say, I wouldn't be laying the price on Rayan here. I do think that she should submit this girl on the ground. Alice has not really shown anything on the ground at all, and it's just quite unfortunate if she's not able to A, get the fight to the ground successfully, and B, find the submission. But if what you're saying is correct in terms of those in the injury news on the arm, then I probably wouldn't even go anywhere near this fight. So I'm staying away with a 10-foot pole.
So far, all I want to say is that was just some Twitter banter that I was seeing. That was some rumor mill stuff. I have no confirmation of that. I will have to do my own research and due diligence on that point. But I will say I did tape this fight. I'm a glutton for punishment. What could I say? I didn't go back too deep. I watched their UFC material. And ultimately, I just think Rayan dos Santos is a better fighter, but she's a career underperformer. So you don't want to lay big prices with fighters like that. They'll make you cry in your coffee. But I do think, Elise Ardelean, there's very little except for a girl who looks like she's willing to show up in shape and try hard. And I just think she's not very talented. So no disrespect. I wish her the best of luck, but just got to call it the way we see it. All right, next up, guys. Please go ahead.
I don't want to have to say, wow, I lost money on Rayan dos Santos again for the 3rd time. So I'm passing.
Hey, sometimes 3rd time's the charm, though, Wiz. You see? No, I'm kidding. I would no shame keeping your hands clean of that one. Next up, my man, we got Balaji Oki. He was scheduled to be on this card, guys. And unfortunately, if we scroll down here, a lot of fizzled bouts, a lot of canceled bouts per Tapology this week. And one of them, Markel Medeiros, Balaji Oki. I saw Markel Medeiros posted, today, wasn't feeling well, doesn't want to go out there and be a lesser version of himself. So now Balaji Oki is instead taking on Michael Aswell. And if you guys remember last season on Contender Series, I had said, Michael Aswell for me was a nip-tuck loser against Bogdan Grad. I thought it could have went either way. You look back, I actually retweeted earlier today my thoughts watching Fury FC live when he lost to Yadier Devay. I thought it was a really close fight. I thought it could have went either way. And I honestly thought that if you were raising one guy's hand, I thought it was going to be Michael Aswell. I thought it could have been a draw. He kind of got beat up in that first round. He was in some bad situations. Then you saw over the course of the fight, I thought round 2 and 3 were super close, but maybe Aswell round. So I was like, man, maybe they're going to raise his hand. Maybe it'll be a draw. And instead it goes to Deval. And we just saw that guy showed up and looked like $1 million in his UFC debut, just like we expected on this show, by the way, baby. Hey, but in any case, right, you go back and you look at Michael Aswell. He looked like a UFC-ready product then. He's just a little basic in his skills, likes to throw boxing combinations, likes to go out there and get into fights, man. He's not afraid to fight anybody. And Balaji Oki, a little bit low volume, a little bit low tempo. He's clearly dangerous. When he throws, he thumps, he gets respect, but he's a guy that, a lot of time you're watching him in the footage and he's shaking that head. He's showing some feints. He's moving forward and he's just not throwing quite as much as you would hope because the guy's 29. He's talented. He's big. He hits hard. But if you don't put stuff out there, it's hard for the judges to give it to you, right? So I do think he's the kind of guy where, you go 15 minutes with Balaji Oki, I think you got a decent chance of getting the win, right? But on the other side, he's a powerful guy. You don't want to get into too many wild, reckless exchanges. And Michael Aswell, he is a kind of guy that he's under control, but he's not afraid to exchange. So for me, it's a curious fight. I think if this is a IQ test, if I'm Michael Aswell, I'm going out there and trying to make this guy wrestle and grapple with me a little bit. Not because Aswell is better there, but because maybe you can make him tired. Maybe you can get a little bit of lactic acid buildup before those boxing exchanges. And frankly, I think Aswell could take over this fight in rounds 2 and 3 with his pace, with his cardio, with his ability to throw a solid amount of output. Bogdan Grad needed to do a little bit of everything and be powerful and do a lot of stuff right to nab a close decision. And by the way, Bogdan Grad's a former 155 pounder. Right? He fought Tom Nolan, basically realizing, there's guys that are 6'3" in the UFC at this weight class. Don't need to do this shit anymore. Bogdan Grad looked like an alien before that fight. I was convinced Bogdan was the betting side. And still it was a really close fight. And it was a competitive one, and it could have went either way. So I feel like Michael Aswell, he's going to go out there and fight hard for your dollars. He's a little undersized here, 24 years of age, but he's got a lot of really relevant experience at this level. And when I see the price, I must admit I was surprised. What do you think about this one, Wiz?
I think we see this one differently. Look, for me, I think obviously Balaji Oki has the upside in this fight just for not being on short notice, not being on 3 days notice. That's a huge factor when talking about this line. And I think the line would be completely different if both fighters had a full camp. I don't think it would be flipped by any means or closer to pick 'em, but I still think that Oki would be a favorite, just not as wide. Now, when it comes to the skill sets, I just, I don't like how Michael Aswell reacts to punches, and I don't like how Michael Aswell lacks striking defense. For me, he just gets hit a little bit too often for my liking, and Oki is a guy who, yes, is low volume. I do agree, but he does have power, and I do think that he could put Aswell out here in the first or second round. Now, where I worry is Oki wearing out a little bit into the third round, starting to gas out, but also you could say the same for Aswell, who's coming in on short notice. So doesn't give me too much pause. Now, am I going out there and parlaying Balaji Oki at minus 360? Probably not. The opener, whoever got the opener, you're doing great at minus 175. That was a great snipe. But I just think that Oki is going to be too physical at this weight class for Aswell. I believe they are fighting at 155. Aswell moving up also at 155. So I just think the more natural 155er who's on a full camp will likely end up winning this fight in Balaji Oki. So I think it's Oki by KO. I'll probably try to see what KO 2 looks like. I think Aswell can survive the storm in the first round. But then once second round hits, cardio probably starts to dump a little bit. And if Oki finds the kill shot, we'll be making some stacks.
Fair play, my brother. Listen, I will say a couple things in response. I do think there's some merit to what you're saying in terms of the short notice. I definitely want to acknowledge that. However, I think it's important to note Cameron Graves was supposed to be fighting Michael Aswell for the Fury FC title. So he's preparing for a 5-rounder in June. His camp's a little bit condensed, right? He's kind of got to get things moving a little bit quicker. But the other thing is, a lot of these fighters, their camp, they want to improve their skills. They want to get better, but they got to get down to weight, right? And like, that's a huge part of camp is like weight management. Let's get down to this weight under control, discipline, week over week. Michael Aswell doesn't really have to cut a ton of weight here, right? He's not that big, but he's also used to fighting guys of this ilk, right? Bogdan Grad was having success at 155. He just got to the UFC where guys are fucking 10 times his size. And he's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Meanwhile, you look at Michael, do I expect him to have success long-term as a lightweight? No, right? Because he'll run into these guys like Balaji, bigger than him, longer than him. But it's like, okay, one night to go out there and prove your mettle. And I just look at Balaji and I say to myself, are there any red flags, right? Because you look at him, he's got clear natural talent, skills, abilities. Are there any red flags? I think the two that I come up with are, number one, he's low volume. Number two, he's not that experienced, right? They got the commensurate professional experience. And I would say the guy who's actually fought the stiffer competition is probably Michael Aswell. Close, right? Close margins, but I would honestly believe that. So it comes down to, where is this fight going to take place? If it takes place on the feet, seems like it's going to be a fight where both guys have opportunities to land on each other. I think Balaji, he's very powerful, so he gets away with a lot, but he also takes a lot of risks in the pocket. Like, he throws with his hands down. He kind of gets into some contentious exchanges. Kawamba was missing by like half an inch over and over, and his coach was like, step forward. Like, he was afraid to step forward because he didn't want to get hit with the return shots, but he was like whiffing, like blowing air past his face with all of his punches. And I just feel like Michael Aswell has better distance management. Like, Kawamba for me is like a guy who's still very jittery out there. And Aswell, for all of his flaws, which I think you acknowledge, hey, sometimes he gets hit too clean on the feet, wobbles him up. That's the biggest fear I have for him in this one. But it's like, he's a plus 275 underdog. And if you said to me, this fight goes 15 minutes, I think he's going to be ahead on the strike count. Like, I am pretty confident in that. So that's where, for me, the short notice is an element. The size is an element. I do think Oki's a better natural athlete. But I have this sneaky feeling Michael Aswell is like one of these young vets, where he's got this ability to come in, fight a pretty solid basic game, and just do it over and over, can beat guys on the fringes, and like almost like a Chris Curtis, right? Where Chris isn't going to take you down and submit you or something, but he's got a good takedown defense. He's got good boxing. He's basic and effective. And I just feel like Michael Aswell is kind of in that same range, like not the heaviest handed boxer, but he's going to box. He's going to box 100 significant strikes over the course of 15. And unless you could put him down or take him down, he's going to be in your face and on your ass all night. So for me, that's the kind of thing that I like to look for in underdogs. But admittedly, you talked about minus 175, completely different price than minus 360, right? It's run away. So I think that at these current odds, right, I'm looking at plus 280s on the board. I think it's a Michael Aswell or pass situation at those odds. But Balaji, very talented guy, preparing for this date. And I think he was favored to win his other matchup as well against Markel Medeiros. So now you've got an Aswell who's, not as proven in the UFC, right? We had Medeiros, a couple of UFC wins under his belt. But for me, Michael Aswell's gone 50-50 with two guys that I think will have some success in the UFC. So interesting fight. And I'm glad that we have some early disagreements so we keep the conversation flowing. Let's see if we agree on this next one, my brother. We got Andreas Gustafsson taking on Officer Trevin Giles, also known as The Problem, but we always call him Officer Giles. And I truly believe like Trevin Giles is one of these guys that is less than the sum of his parts, unfortunately. We talk about winning and losing being a habit in mixed martial arts. I feel like he's developed a habit of losing fights that are winnable for him, And I made a comment maybe 6 months back or something, and I said, I truly believe Trevin Giles, before he got to the UFC, is a better fighter than he is today. And that's the kind of regression I don't want to see in an athlete over the course of their career. And I think part of it is confidence. When you lose confidence, it's a lot harder to go out there and set the tone and dictate. And he's had multiple things go wrong, right? Like, he's had fights where he wins the first 2 rounds and then self-immolates in the third, gives it up. But he's also had fights where he goes out there and wins every minute till he gets knocked out. And those are the kind of fights where you just say to yourself, man, Trevin Giles is just tough to get behind. And then to see a fight like the Preston Parsons fight, where frankly, I thought he was going to win. I picked him by split decision, and then it was a split decision. It was a gross fight. And it's just like, again, at his peak, at his prime, he could beat good guys. He could finish them. He could hurt them. He could put them away. And I don't know that we're seeing the same guy out there. I don't think the level of enthusiasm is the same. I'll save my analysis on Gustafsson because I don't have too much, and I'll kick it to my brother Wizz. What do you think about this fight? What do you think about this matchup? Any value to be had, my brother?
No value to be had, but at the same time, I'm not encouraging anything on Gustafsson. So I'll start on Gustafsson's side since you broke down Giles so perfectly there. For me, I think Gustafsson is a knockout waiting to happen, quite frankly. A lot of people are going to harp about this guy's durability. And yeah, sure, he's shown quite the durability in his lead up to the UFC in the Contender Series. But you never want to see someone eat that many clean punches to the chin. This guy's hands, they are just like stapled to his thighs, and he just doesn't know what to do. And so what he does is he bum rushes his opponents to the cage, and he just clinch controls them, and then it's just like dirty clinch boxing is what his specialty is. And quite frankly, I just think that's going to work here. I think he's going to be able to do this to Giles, who not as physical of a fighter as he was when he was coming up into the UFC. And I just question the motive behind Giles and like why he's still fighting. The fight against Prates was winning every single minute of that fight until he got knocked out. Really unfortunate. And then his last fight out really didn't show much on the feet against Malat. He just let Malat go out there and dance on him for 15 minutes and get calf kicked and lose a very clear 30-27. So what is there in the future for Trevin Giles beyond this fight? And I just think there's all for Andreas Gustafsson to gain, and I think he'll be able to find his game, take this fight to the clinch, and dominate there until he finds his second round KO. But yeah, I think Gustafsson is tough enough for this one, but once he meets a hard puncher, I think he's going to get his first knockout loss.
Totally respect that take, my man. And one thing I think is really interesting, and I'm going to share this briefly just so people get an idea. So we talked about the first two fights of the night, right? And we've got Elise Ardelean. She's sitting currently at a plus 225 underdog on Bet Online. Then you see Michael Aswell. He's currently sitting at a plus 270 underdog on Bet Online. And that kind of tracks with what we're seeing, right, on Tapology. We're seeing 93% of the voters on Oki, 92% of the voters on Dos Santos. So it kind of makes sense, right? Like people are picking them. People probably will be betting them in the market. How about this interesting note here, guys? We got Gustafsson coming in 85% in terms of how many people are picking him on Tapology, which is only one small indicator, right? Let's be clear about that. But these are people that are clued in about fights, right? Tapology is like hardcore of hardcore type people. You don't meet casuals with Tapology accounts that track their bets and picks and whatever week over week, right? So a lot of people are picking Gustafsson here. The line on Bet Online is plus 142 for Officer Trevin Giles. And that does tell me that at least one sharp person in the market is on Trevin Giles. So I will say there's some things to note about this fight that I do think are interesting and important to talk about. I'll bring up some visual aids on screen as well to try and illustrate my point. So Trevin Giles is the numbers on the left here, guys, just for perspective. And he's not throwing a ton of volume, right? Which is the really concerning thing. However, his striking accuracy and defense are kind of elite for a 14-fight sample in the UFC. Like when you just look at those numbers, irrespective of knockdowns and like losses, and it's just like, that's really good. You know, he's not easy to hit based on his defense, right? Carlos Prates, it took one, but it wasn't easy to hit him, right? Like he was getting really frustrated in that fight because Trevin was backing him up with the jab, pushing him into the fence, kind of being awkward with him and closing down the space. And what's really frustrating about guys like Trevin Giles is like, you watch him and you see the skills. You see why he can and should win fights. But part of fighting is about skills and techniques, and part of it is about enthusiasm and aggression and who wants to go out there and get in a fight more, you know? And like sometimes you don't have it anymore. You know, you threw your last punch. You fired your last shot. You don't have it anymore. And that's my concern about Trevin Giles. Because like if you just strip this down, Andreas Gustafsson has a 43% striking defense rate against Pat Pitlick. And Pat Pitlick, with all due respect, is some guy from Canada that tried his best. But like, he's not a top level UFC guy. I thought Pat was going to get the contract. I honestly thought they set that fight up for Pat to get a contract in the UFC. He was on looking for a fight. If you guys remember, they had looking for a fight. They got Imperato, they got Pat Pitlick, and they both got absolutely decimated, unfortunately, on Contender Series. And Pitlick got his face broken in half. The guy's tough as an old leather boot, but he landed as well. So like, it kind of just, you watch back the fight and it's like an awkward clinch fight where one dude just got beat up by like a big, angry Viking guy. But like, did that fight tell me Gustafsson's on some high level and his skills and techniques are, next level? No, it just showed me he's got a lot of enthusiasm, aggression, will to win. So I do think Trevin Giles is probably going to be a live favorite at some point in this fight. I'm going to make that very clear because I do think there's a world in which Trevin Giles stands at distance, pops this dude with the jab, and doesn't let him get close. But Gustafsson, if you guys have followed him, he said his plan is to go full Artard, right? That is his literal stated plan for this fight. And again, it's like, if I'm laying chalk, I know some people, my guy Dan Levy on Half the Battle, one of the sharpest in the game, he actually said, I want him to do that in this fight. And like, I get where he's coming from, but also I'm like, I never want my guy's plan at chalk to do that, right? Because when you play those games in MMA, anything can happen. Trevin Giles isn't the most devastating striker you've ever seen, but he's not a punk. He knows how to hit people. He throws good jabs. He sticks people on the end of them a lot. So I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, if you just go out and go spaz mode on Trevin Giles, and by the way, let's look at one other thing in this fight. Trevin Giles, same size, younger guy, way more UFC experience. Like, you can check a lot of boxes for Trevin Giles in this fight where it's like, at 500 in the UFC, how bad could you be? Then you start to look back and you say to yourself, okay, well, who is he losing to, right? Because I also think quality of competition matters. Trevin Giles losses in the UFC. Mike Malott, fringe ranked fighter. Carlos Prates, top 10 guy. Gabriel Bonfim, fringe ranked fighter. Michael Morales, top 10 guy. Dricus Duplessis, middleweight champion. Like, those are guys you're going to lose to. Like, more often than not, I think the Bonfim fight is the only fight I picked Giles to win. Out of that bunch, it wasn't going to happen, right? Bonfim just got after him, got to his neck. What's interesting to me in this fight in terms of how I would look to conceptualize it, I might look at something like an ends by sub, like a Gustafsson by sub. If Trevin Giles doesn't want to be here anymore, Gustafsson 2-0 career to the submission. How about this though? Trevin Giles, he went exchange for exchange with Roman Dolidze on the mat. And I feel like people forget that. I go back and I search my old tweets to know what I thought about these guys at the time they fought and things like that. And if you go back, Trevin Giles is in an Ashi Garami giving Roman Dolidze the old school whooping with the back of his hand. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, Trevin Giles, when you get into exchanges with it, he's not bad. Even the Brendan Allen fight, you go back and watch from his LFA days. That's why I say he was a better fighter pre-UFC than in the UFC. I can't get to Gustafsson seeing how the fight played out, but I want to take this fight to gather data. I'm team never again with Trevin Giles after that Bonfim disgrace. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I do think over the course of 15 minutes, he could have won that fight, but instead he goes out there, gets guillotined in the first round. I think when I'm looking at this matchup, Gustafsson is probably going to break him down over time and eventually make him quit because he's got more will to win. But like, skill for skill, MMA skills, I think Trevin Giles is much better. So really hard fight for me to just like come out and give you a definitive answer. I'm just surprised by a few things. Like, again, 90% of Tapology or whatever, but the line doesn't reflect it. And it's like, I see why the line doesn't reflect it. Trevin Giles, if he's to have a great performance, could win. But he's just been so inconsistent, and the trend line has been in the wrong direction. So for me, I'm keeping my hands clean to this one in both directions. But fascinating fight. Any closing thoughts there, Wiz?
No, not at all. I just think that I kind of agree with Dan's take on wanting Gustafsson to go full Artard. It's just for the sole fact that the style of Gustafsson allows him to do it just to get to the position he wants to get into, which is the clinch, against someone like Giles specifically, because Giles is, I'm not going to say harmless, doesn't really show off that KO power. So you can go a little bit crazy and back him up to the fence, especially in the Apex, smaller cage, just to get to where you want to get to and then start firing off your own offense. And if you can keep him against the cage, cool, there's your round. And over and over and over, and then fight's over.
Fair play, my man. I wanted to just note, Unlike Michael Aswell, Trevin Giles did not have a fight booked already, so he's taking this on short notice. Jeremiah Wells pulled out pretty recently. I want to say it's within the last 10 days. So ultimately, short notice fight. Not sure exactly where Trevin Giles is at. Could be a cash grab opportunity. So all those reasons are why I'm keeping my hands clean in this one.
Now, that fight, the original fight, that was my plant the flag spot of the week on Jeremiah Wells, because you cannot go full art against that guy. He will not.
He might do the same thing back at you. You remember when he just sprinted wall first into the cage and then picked up Blood Diamond, got the win?
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty legendary.
Yeah. I think he would have knocked Gustafsson out of the freaking cage.
Interesting. Well, hopefully we'll get that one back in the future. But without further ado, I think a man close to your own heart, my brother. We got Jordan Leavitt, the Monkey King, taking on Kurt Holobaugh, Kurt the Hurt. I think, is that a new nickname? I feel like I don't remember that. But in any case, fun scrap. Go ahead.
I think that's a new one. And let's just start by saying both these guys have some great topology photos. Both almost identical, but one's just a little bit more ripped than the other, just a little bit. I'm not going to talk about the Leavitt side too much. Leavitt is a good friend, trained with him a couple of times. Wish him the best. Obviously, I'm very biased here. I think he's going to win. Holobaugh, the one thing I will say is on the feet, he may find the advantage here. But we all know the glaring hole in Holobaugh's game. It's the takedown defense. And I'm going to drop the mic and hand it over to you, Mr. Liam, right there.
Sure thing, my man. Honestly, I did some looking into this fight, and I think the line is maybe slightly prohibitive. I would probably put it at Leavitt minus 150 to minus 185 on gut instinct. And I'll tell you why. I'm not going to be betting Kurt Holobaugh, because there's nothing that makes me sicker than watching somebody lay on their back for 15 minutes that I bet on. Jesse Butler versus Brad Katona. Shout out to you. I appreciate you fixing the handlebar between rounds. In any case, though, you go back and you look, Jordan Leavitt is a guy that has had a lot of success on the ground in his career, but there's also been some signs of vulnerability at times. You know, I believe he's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If I'm wrong about that, he's a brown belt. But I remember before the Chase Hooper fight, everybody was telling me he was going to beat Chase Hooper on the ground. And I was like, guys, no, he's not. And I was like, he is going to go out there and he will roll around. He can put him in some interesting spots. But I was like, Chase is really, really fast on the ground. He's extremely savvy, and he's a black belt for a long time. And it's just like, that's a bad matchup for a purple belt that's really good. You know what I mean? Because like good purple belts want to get to work in their jiu-jitsu, but against a really savvy black belt, they'll eventually like make a mistake and get caught, right? And that's exactly what happened against Chase. He was having some moments. He even said like, made a huge mistake. I went for a leg lock from top position. My coach would probably strangle me if I did that, right? Don't do that, right? If you're on top, stay on top. If you get bucked off or what, and you have to go for it, fine. But it's different than going for a leg lock from top. Ask Cyril Gane, right? Go for a leg lock from top, you lose the world title fight. It can be a big deal. So you see that Jordan Leavitt went for a leg lock from on top, made a huge mistake, and ended up giving up his back. Chase Hooper finishes the fight shortly thereafter. I think when you go back and look, that was a huge mistake, and Jordan Leavitt will probably have learned from that mistake. He's been out for a long time, right? He's still just 29 years of age. He's not an old man, right? He's not washed or past his – unless he decides he doesn't want to fight anymore, I think the guy's got a future in fighting. So then where is the flaw in his game that I think could bite him against Kurt Holobaugh? Kurt is a really crafty grappler. Like, you give him one moment of opportunity, he is going to try and throw some real crazy shit at you. And he has been doing this grappling stuff for a long time. So if you go back and look, his only submission loss is to the pride of Section 9, baby, stand up. Shane Burgos gets dropped, right? Hits the ground. And as he's falling back, Kurt comes down, tries to go off on him, and Shane falls off to an armbar. Very underrated grappler, gets the armbar finish. It was beautiful. But that's the last time Kurt Holobaugh has been submitted. So he's not an easy guy to get out of there on the mat. Other good grapplers, you know, you think of Trey Ogden. Trey Ogden nearly submitted Jordan Leavitt, and I think people forget that. He had a deep guillotine, very deep. This is why I bet Chase Hooper. I had screenshots of it. I was like, holy shit. Like, Trey Ogden was very close on that guillotine. He squeezed the shit out of it. Jordan's a tough bastard, right? He does not give up easily. You got to get him. You got to have him in bad positions. Chase Hooper, I think, is a fringe top 15 fighter. Paddy Pimblett is a top 10 fighter in the lightweight division. It's like those guys on the ground, yeah, they can distance themselves from Leavitt. Kurt Holobaugh, he will not be beating Leavitt consistently in scrambles. I don't buy that for a second. But he can win one scramble. And I always tell my wrestlers, you're one exchange away from winning the match. Put them on their back and pin them and be done with it, right? It's the same thing in a fight. You know, all it takes is one good exchange. So if you're a guy that doesn't have great ability to win decisions, enter Kurt Holobaugh. You got to go out there and try and finish people, or you're really not going to win very many MMA fights. So what does Kurt need to do? In this fight, he needs to probably, because he's probably going to spend the majority of this fight on his back, submit Jordan Leavitt. And now you're seeing the submission price is a big number. And I'm like, that doesn't really make a full amount of sense to me. I played Chase Hooper sub at plus 450 against Leavitt. He's a black belt. He's a very crafty, savvy guy on the ground. Now you're seeing Holobaugh, it's like plus 9XX. And I just think to myself, I'm like, how else does Kurt win this fight? Like, I guess he can knock him out on the feet. I respect that. But I don't anticipate Jordan Leavitt going mano-y-mano on the feet. When he's on the feet, he throws hard calf kicks. He throws front kicks to the face. He tries to bully people into the clinch. It's ironic that he has 2 wins via knockout in the UFC. But again, you're looking at a guy with the majority of his UFC wins. I'm talking about Jordan Leavitt via knockout, KO or TKO. He put Matt Wyman to sleep, forearm across the jaw, slammed him head down and put him out cold, right? And then against Victor Martinez, big knees in the clinch, like actually fucked him up bad. So I just think when you look at Kurt Holobaugh, he's 38 years of age. We talked a million times about what? When fighters are over the age of 38, they're much more likely to get knocked out. Raoni Barcelos, not known for being a massive puncher, right? Goes out there and knocks out Kurt Holobaugh. He's the only guy to ever do it. So when I look at this matchup, I say to myself, Jordan Leavitt has 2 wins via knockout in the UFC, and it's 13-1. Doesn't make much sense to me, truthfully. What's to stop him from slamming Kurt Holobaugh on his head if he goes for a triangle? What's to stop him from kneeing this guy in the head if he makes a... It's like, I think Kurt has an ability to knock him out, but again, it's a massive disparity. It's a 10-point disparity in the lines. It's like, I don't know if I see that. Then you look at Kurt and Leavitt, the submission odds, they're completely at odds. And I'm like, you have a purple belt against a black belt, and they're saying like the purple belt 100% more likely to submit Kurt. I'm like, huh? So for me, I feel like all the props are kind of ridiculous in this fight. And that's the way I'll be looking at it more often than not. Respect to both guys. I think they're both good fighters. I just think when you look at it, Jordan is faster, younger, closer to his prime. And so if somebody gets on top, rides out the decision, I think it's going to be Jordan. If somebody wins like a kickboxing match, I think it's a 50-50 where I'd favor Kurt like 55-45, but it's like Jordan, again, younger, probably a little bit more durable overall. Like, I don't know exactly what to make of this fight. I think Kurt, more experienced, savvy guy, hard worker, earned it all through the Ultimate Fighter, but it's like the realities of age and the realities of his skill set where he's very poor at defending takedowns is a tough matchup for him. And I just think, why is it impossible that Jordan Leavitt gets on top of this guy routinely and then beats the shit out of him, right? Like just passes his guard or something and beats him up from on top. I wouldn't put that past him. So it's just, for me, an interesting fight, a curious fight, and a fight where I'll probably be looking at the prop market, if anything. Anything you wanted to add here, Wiz? Do you think I'm out to lunch, by the way? Because like Kurt Holobaugh was losing to Lee Hammond and then hit a fucking beautiful guillotine from out of nowhere that Lee Hammond never saw coming. And like, I just don't think that you could, count this guy out completely if they're going to grapple for 15 minutes,
I just, I don't think the way you're looking at it is wrong at all. I just don't think it's possible for Holobaugh to slip one against Leavitt. I think in prior discussions when we spoke about the Chase Hooper fight, being too fast in scrambles is, I think, the similar kind of argument that I present here, where I think Leavitt's just going to be too fast with scrambles, and that's how I ultimately think he's going to keep Holobaugh on the ground for all 5 minutes of the round if he takes him down instantly. I think it's going to be very hard for Holobaugh to get up. And just from what I've seen with Leavitt in the training room, I think that he's leveled up, not just in the striking, but specifically the grappling. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised.
Hell yeah, man. I'm glad to hear that. That's kind of what I figured, lean into your strengths. And he's been out for a while. Didn't seem like it was due to injury. So seems like the guy's just been gearing up for another run in the promotion. And I think a lot of people would be well served from doing that. It all depends on the fighter, right? Case by case basis. But you go out there, if you're a grappling heavy fighter and you get beat in the grappling, you got to make some adjustments, right? You got to figure out, all right, how am I going to approach? What do I want to do differently? And I think that if he's been, putting the due diligence towards that over the time he's been off, then this should be a manageable task, so to speak. So I'm going to pick Jordan Leavitt to get the job done here. I think he wins this fight, but I just wanted to say, like, in terms of how I would price this out, like, I would almost think that Kurt Holobaugh by submission is a lot of his win equity here, because I think he's probably getting taken down frequently. So if you're on the ground, what's your best option? Probably to submit somebody, right? Kevin Holland has like the one knockout from your back. Who else, right? You scratch your chin, maybe Nico Price. Like 5 guys have ever knocked somebody out off their back in the UFC. So other than that, you got to throw up subs and hope for the best. And I just think Kurt's going to be throwing up subs and hoping for the best a lot of this fight. Oh, speaking of throwing up subs, hoping for the best, we got 2 jiu-jitsu aces here, and I'm really fascinated by this fight, Wiz. For me, this is the main event of the week. Like, 2 guys I'm most interested in watching fight: the world's most dangerous pastor, Jafel Filho, Poderoso, Ali Nascimento, 2 very, very high-level jiu-jitsu black belts. Jafel Filho, this close to submitting Muhammad Mokaev. Anybody else taps? Alan Nascimento made Carlos Hernandez look like a first-day grappler. So ultimately, these guys, high-level, fun, interesting fight. How do you think it plays out, Wiz? Do the grapplers go out there and have a kickboxing match, or what are you expecting here?
This is going to surprise a lot of people, but I kind of grade this, and don't take this literally, but I almost view it as a grappler versus striker matchup where Nascimento is the more skilled grappler. I'm not going to say he's the only grappler in this matchup, but the more skilled grappler, in my opinion. And Filho is going to be the much more powerful striker in the matchup. But I think this fight's very close. But I do have a lot of things to say on the Nascimento side where I think that he should probably be deserved favorite, and why I think line is probably accurate where it's at right now. Now, when I say line being accurate, that kind of just says I think it's a past fight. Watch it for enjoyment. And for me, I just think that Alan Nascimento is obviously going to be the bigger guy in the cage, but I think he'll be able to land takedowns here. On top, I don't think Filho has faced anyone that has been as good as a jiu-jitsu player from top or from bottom as Nascimento. And the one thing about Filho is that he will invite the grappling and he will also initiate. So I don't think there will be an issue with this fight taking place in the grappling realm. Similar to the Mokaev fight, he was initiating and he was being initiated on. So I do think that the grappling won't cancel out, and I do think that the fight will play a lot in the grappling realm. And if that holds true, I think Nascimento comes out with the win, just because overall, Nascimento is able to hold positions a lot longer and he's able to stay safe on bottom, whereas Filho is more of a aggressive guard passer, and I just don't think that's going to work here against the longer frame of Nascimento. But if this fight stays on the feet, we know what to expect from Filho. Really fast hands. He has some solid power, but not the greatest in terms of technique. But I do think that he will have the advantage there compared to Nascimento. But all things said, I'm very excited for this matchup too. Predicting Nascimento to win, but staying away from the betting window, because I do think that this fight can play out very close and kind of has a split decision screamed all over it. What do you think, Liam?
I'm torn in a few ways, because on the one hand, I do agree with you. Alan Nascimento's the bigger guy. If you press me for who I think probably wins the first round of this fight, I would also go with Nascimento. And only because he's big, physical, strong, and, he kind of comes out with a real desire to get the fight to his own office, right? Looking for takedowns, looking for back takes, looking to get on top. And he hasn't fought in 2 years. He's cutting a lot of weight to make this weight class. You could tell just by looking at the guy, right? And he looks like he's in great physical condition. I could take nothing away from him. He looks like he's well prepared for this fight. The thing I will note about him, he does seem to, fatigue, You know, when you watch his fights, a lot of times when these guys are big and they cut a lot of weight, they tend to drop off in their performance over the course of 15 minutes. I think Nascimento, very strong starter. By round 3, I just think he's a different guy. You know, I think he's a lot more beatable in the 3rd round. I think you could scramble with him in the 3rd round. I just think in that 1st round, he's very technical. He makes all the right decisions in the grappling, so you got to be very careful. For me, the concern for Jothel Filho here is that, number one, he can get hurt, you know, with some regularity, right? Like a lot of guys have found a way to hurt him in his UFC run, especially Daniel Barres. I picked Daniel Barres to beat him. I thought he was going to go out there and knock him out in the 1st round. But what did we find out? There is a dog in Jothel Filho, and if you give this guy an inch, he's going to take a mile. You know, he basically got nearly TKO'd with body shots against Daniel Barres, composed himself from bottom, got back up to his feet, and then made that guy pay by beating the shit out of him, right? Like, Jothel Filho plays for fucking keeps, dude. He was like, oh, you got tired? Hold this. And then he beats his ass. So I'm like, this is the world's most dangerous pastor. Make no mistake. This guy on Contender Series, he's made me learn my lesson a couple times, okay? Because I also thought Roybert Echeverria was going to have a good chance against him. You go and watch that fight, and I'm now drawing a blank because I watched this footage like 5 days ago, and I've watched so much footage in between. But when you go back and watch, essentially one of these rounds is like a clear round for Roybert. One of these rounds is a clear round for Filho. They're both out there getting some work done. I think it was round 1 Filho, round 2 for his opponent, if my memory serves, right? Like Roybert was starting to come on a little bit, and Filho's coach got on his ass and basically told him, hey, fuck all this grappling shit, dude. Go out there and fucking knock this guy out. And he's like, heard you. And then he goes out there and just fucking delivers Roybert in the 3rd round. And I was like, holy shit. Roybert is now on The Ultimate Fighter. We'll have to see how he does. But he was not a bad fighter coming into that fight. And he had a lot of confidence and he had some skill. But, bro, he's getting hurt a few times in that fight because Filho was landing hard. I think we have this interesting dynamic where I think Alan Nascimento is the more responsible grappler defensively. And I also think he is the more defensively responsible striking guy. I think he's more durable. But I think Jothel Filho is more dangerous. I think he hits way fucking harder. I think he will take your head off or go for body shots and try and put you down. And Nascimento never finishes people with strikes. He's a guy that's very reliant on that grappling to beat people. And it's like against a guy who's another world-class black belt, a guy, by the way, I was, before the fight with Ode Osborne, I took the under 2.5 rounds because I was worried that Filho could get hurt. Look what happened to Luis Garule. Having a good fight, Ode puts one on you, change your life, right? So Filho in that fight was so smart, runs out, grabs a hold of the guy, goes to take him to the ground, latches himself on, pulls him backwards, sweeps to the top of it. Everything about it was beautiful. And you just watch the guy grapple. He makes great decisions. Muhammad Makayev was struggling to defeat Jothel Filho, right? And I had said in that fight, I thought it was going to come down to a submission in round 3, which is hilarious in hindsight because you go and look at that fight. And guys, both of them had a sellout attempt for a submission in the 3rd round. And 9 out of 10 UFC fighters, I don't care who you are tapping when your fucking knee is inside out. Muhammad Makayev, built different, right? He gets that award. He's the built different guy of the week. You go back and look at that fight. Makayev lets his knee go inside out. And then he's so mad that this has happened to him that he gets up, drags his one gimp leg behind him, jumps on Filho's back and puts him out. You're just like, Muhammad Makayev has the heart of a champion. Fact. Jothel Filho, guys, submits 9 out of 10 UFC fighters with that knee bar. It was fucking class. It was world class. He turned the guy's knee backwards. Probably changed his life forever. Muhammad Makayev doesn't care. Alan Nascimento, having a hard time getting to the cage. Been out for a while. Slows down in round 3. If you give Filho that window, we saw it against Roybert. We saw it against Makayev. He will give everything he has to try and take you out late. So for me, I almost feel better about entering live after 1. But the problem is Jothel Filho is the kind of guy that can flip the script on you in the 1st round, right? Where he goes out there and he's getting his ass whooped by Barres, and then he says, hey, hold this, and then puts him down. And you're just like, this guy really is a slick fighter, man. And he's a gamer. So for me, I feel like Jothel Filho has the heart, has the will, and he's underrated. But I also feel like Alan Nascimento is a fucking big, good grappler. He's hard to beat. So I'm probably going to enter live after 1 on Jothel Filho, and I will probably have some Filho round 2 and round 3 before the fight because I do think his pace is probably what he will need in order to win this one. But I think Filho is just a really clever guy who stays dangerous throughout the fight. And if you give him a moment of opportunity, he'll take it. And I just think Alan Nascimento, he's let some moments slip, right? We saw it on Contender Series. We've seen it where, he'll let somebody outwork him by just a little. He'll let somebody stay in the top position. And that's just the kind of thing that against Filho, I don't think you should do that, because I think in the first round, he might get the takedowns, but if he starts to slow down, Filho will try and take him down, and he will try and put him on the back foot, and he will swing hard for the fences. And I just don't know that Alan can get his respect in the striking. I do think Alan is probably going to win if they strike in the first round. But again, do I think he can keep Filho off him for 15 minutes? That's where, for me, this fight gets fascinating, and I'm fired up. My main event of the week. Anything you want to add here, my brother? Why? Oh, please go ahead.
I've been just like back and forth on this fight because early on in the week, I was more leaning towards the Filho side. Then I was bouncing around after tape and was like, it might be Nascimento. But then I caught myself in that argument and realized that this fight just has too many different outcomes that I can see happening. And whenever I see that, it just screams pass. So I'm just reiterating the past statement on my end.
You know what's funny too, man, is I'm a little surprised that this fight is favored to go the distance. Jafel Filho is an under guy historically. I think that maybe is correlated with Alon Nascimento via decision. But again, it's like, how does Jafel Filho lose? I mean, he's a kill or be killed guy. Most of the time he's going to go out there and live or die on his offense. So for me, that feels a little interesting here. I'd probably be leaning towards the dog and violence. Because I think both of those get cash, or I think Nascimento, if he just is levels above on the ground or something, maybe he could get him. But I just don't see that being very likely, But I'm fascinated by this one, man. And again, when you talk about many different ways this fight could play out, I couldn't agree more. When I studied this fight, I was like, this should probably be a pick'em because I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. Like, feels like there's a lot of volatility here.
The fight doesn't go plus 105.
That's what I'm saying, man. A little bit interesting.
Yeah, you get
two violent guys, and I'm seeing money coming in on both Nascimento by sub and Filho by sub. I think both of them are more likely to win by KO than submission here, personally. But
yeah.
Actually, I should say Nascimento is probably more likely to win by sub, but I don't know. It's an interesting fight, man. We'll dig more into this one. More looking at the market required for me.
Oh, yeah.
But in any case, talk about a fight where there's some inherent volatility. You've got Zach Reese taking on Dusko Todorovic. Zach Reese is 2-2 in UFC fights that end in the first round. Or I should say UFC and Dana White Contender Series fights that end in the first round. Otherwise, he would be 1-2 because things have been going sideways for Zach Reese. When he gets in that bottom position, my man starts getting in the full guard and he starts getting brutally knocked out. So I think that in this fight against Dusko Todorovic, the guard is the enemy, my friend. You do not want to do that. But Wizz, I'm going to kick this one over to you first. How do you feel about this absolute train wreck at 185 pounds?
Yeah, it was very tough to see Dusko get absolutely destroyed in his last time out against Mansour Abdul Malik, who, did what everyone expected him to do. So no shame in that loss. Against Leroy Duncan, unfortunate knee injury there, so you can't really account for too much there. Then you look on the Reese side, and really hasn't faced anyone in the UFC of note. Obviously lost to Azamat Bekoev last time out by brutal knockout there. That ground and pound finish was just... I felt for Reese. He had to be stretchered out there. And then time before it, against Jose Medina, won a decision where he was starting to gas out after a round and a half. And then Jose Medina took this guy down, of all people. Like, I remember Zach Reese being taken down by Jose Medina is why people thought and why people were giving an argument for Jose Medina to be able to take down Atiba Gautier. I still do not understand how people came up with, he could probably take Gautier down. But that was the reason, because he took down Zach Reese. And he's probably his only takedown, if I were to
Gautier did also get taken down by some 41-year-old Scottish guy who retired right after, but I feel you.
It's wild to me. It's wild to me. But nonetheless, and then beats Julian Marquez by KO, who's not knocking out Julian Marquez, and loses to Cody Brundage by knockout. So, I just think this line is very wide. I don't think Zach Reese is someone that you can necessarily trust at big chalk, let alone chalk on its own. And Dusko is someone who, yes, has not shown the best in terms of like his UFC performances. But when you take a look at who he's faced, Mansour Abdul Malik, Christian Leroy Duncan, beat the Beverly Hills Ninja, lost to Chitty, beat Maki Pitolo. That's his last 5. I think all of those guys knock Zach Reese out. And even Jordan Wright, I think, would knock Zach Reese out. Now, I'm not advocating for a bet on Dusko Todorovic because we all know that Dusko himself can be knocked out fairly quickly here, and we see the typology on the screen here, 91% for Reese, and you see the huge favorite in terms of the method to be knockout, and I just think that it's it could go both ways here. If Dusko lands a takedown against Reese, what is Reese going to do off his back? Sure, he can throw up some submissions and he can land those arm bars, but I think Dusko is a savvy enough grappler to stay out of stuff like that. And it just takes a couple to hurt Reese on the map. If you're able to land a couple of flush ground and pound shots, then Reese is in a whole world of trouble, and that minus 2xx to 3xx ticket starting to look a little sweaty. So by no means am I going to encourage anyone to bet on Dusko, but also please don't bet on like Reese in parlays or ITD or KO. It's likely to hit a KO 1 for Reese. I think that's his method of victory. If it goes past round 1, I'm definitely going to be live betting Dusko with larger amounts of money depending on what's going on. But I do think this is a very winnable matchup for Dusko, one of the most winnable matchups he's had in a long time. So for me, it's Dusko or pass, and it's I'm leaning towards putting some hard-earned dollar on Dusko. Unfortunately.
Yeah, man, I think that this is a clear Dusko spot as well, or pass, right? There's nothing wrong with passing ever in a mixed martial arts fight, right? $1 saved is $1 earned. But shout out to Uncle Weezy, one of the sharpest guys in the content space. He said, I'm going to bet Dusko at plus 200 and probably play his KO prop plus 475. Dusko has nasty ground and pound and Reese has awful takedown defense. And I agree on both fronts. I had said when Eli Aronoff was fighting this guy on Contender Series, I was like, Eli Aronoff is way smaller. He's going to need a lot of takedowns. He got a takedown instantly and then got armbarred from the full guard, right? And you look back at Dusko's career. Has his problem been that he's a bad grappler? No, that just simply has not been his problem, right? Even against Mansour Abdul Malik, after he just took a knee that lifted him off the ground. Like, I'm not talking about a knee like, hey, I pulled you in, I landed. He kneed him so hard, both of Dusko's feet were no longer connected to the floor. And Dusko still was wrestling, grappling, moving around, like grabbing a hold of a leg, trying to do anything to stay in the fight. And you just say to yourself, Dusko clearly wants to be here, right? Like if he didn't, he'd have retired after the last one. And it's like, I look at this fight with Reese as, you said it, a winnable fight, much more winnable than a lot of recent fights in his career. And the problem with confidently backing Dusko is he's clearly done a lot of damage to his legs, right? If you look at the Christian Leroy Duncan fight, he lost that fight by injury. That sucks. Then you look at his sparring footage. He got kicked in the leg while he was on one foot and tore his ACL. And when you're, let's look at his age because I don't want to speak out of turn here, but we'll go back and share this tab. He's 31 years of age, just like Zach Reese, right? The thing is, Dusko has more experience. He has more experience at a higher level. And Zach Reese has been finished in the first round in both his professional losses, right? He went for that triangle against, our guy, Cody Brundage. Cody picked him up, slammed him on his head, and that's the end of the fight, right? So then you look back and you say to yourself, okay, well, it's a one-time thing, right? Against Bikoev, he was more worried about punching up from the bottom position than he was about covering up or defending. And he got brutally knocked out in that fight where, like you mentioned, he needed to be carried out. And you look back, you got a guy with 2 losses inside the distance. Dusko Todorovic is a massive price to win this fight inside the distance, given those considerations, I feel. And so for me, I do think that you look at Dusko's record. Where is he beating guys? He's taking them down and beating them up with ground and pound. it's kind of what Zach Reese is vulnerable to, right? In his recent performances and in his wins, he's beating guys that aren't very high level. Jose Medina, Julian Marquez. You'd struggle to name guys they could beat cleanly right now in the UFC, right? Like any guy that they could cleanly beat definitively in the UFC, you'd really struggle to come up with names. So I think the same is true for Dusko right now. Like I would struggle to definitively come up with names. Like I'm sure he's going to beat this guy. And I almost feel the same way about Zach Reese. He's a big, strong athlete that I think slows down at the 7.5 minute mark. He's got dangerous power, but he's easy to take down. And those are kind of where we're at with Zach Reese. Like maybe he's made massive strides in his takedown defense. I don't have any evidence of that. Dusko's not really a traditional leg wrestler, right? But he grabs body locks and pulls people to the ground, and he's a BJJ black belt. So I don't think he's going to be hopeless and getting armbarred from the full guard, for example, if he takes this guy down. So for all those reasons, it does feel like a dog or pass situation. I want to see Dusko come in and make weight. He says he looks good, feels good, everything's right for this camp. You never want to take a fighter at their word, right? Let's see him make weight. Let's see him look in great shape on the day before the fight, and I'll probably be clicking the Dusko side. Not a believer in Zach Reese long term. If I'm on the Zach Reese side of things, I'm looking at the under, right? Zach Reese is like an under correlated fighter. The Jose Medina fight, sloppy, ugly look, right? And that was against the guy who's the human punching bag, right? Jose Medina, no disrespect again, but just like what he's shown so far, he's not throwing offense, right? That the thing that I didn't like against Gauthier was I was like, man, he got that one takedown, but like he didn't do anything. Right? Like he didn't make Zach Reese pay for being on bottom. He was just like, all right, I got the takedown. Hell yeah. If you're not submitting Jose Medina from the full guard, Dusko's probably going to be okay. So it's just like, I look at this fight and it's not super high level. I definitely think Zach is capable of winning this fight by knockout. I just don't think he's a guy going to cover massive margins. I remember everybody was so excited to lay the chalk against Brundage. I was like, I'd rather have the chalk on the under, and then the under cashed. Zach Reese did not, right? So maybe that's my bias that's leading me to say I'd rather do the same thing again here. But I feel like if Zach Reese is ever going to justify his prices, he's going to hurt people early. He's going to take them out. He's going to use that big frame, size, physicality. I think sometimes when you take those guys to the ground, you put them in some adversity. They don't like to be there. So I think Dusko's got a chance to go out there and either win this fight by being technically better or go out there and break this guy by putting him in bad positions, make him second guess himself. So shout out to everybody in the chat. We got MMA Locker Room driving back from the Yankees win. Let me listen to some MMA with a few gents. Appreciate you, my brother. K-Deep as well in the chat. A lot of positive commentary from you. So thank you so much. Green King says, I like playing it now. He says, all right. So good luck to each and every one of you guys. Uncle Weezy especially. I know he's already parted ways with his dollars. Wiz, anything you want to add on this fight before we move to the next one?
With this one, we also have to mention, are we getting Zach Reese with hair, or are we getting bald Zach Reese? Is it the battle of the balds, or is it just one bald?
If this is bald Zach Reese, Dusko Todorovic has been upgraded to a mega mortal. No, when you look at it though, I definitely have to say the aura was a massive factor. Peyton Talbot, Zach Reese, they both came in, no hair, completely different ballgame, right?
No
long hair, don't care. That's what Zach Reese needs to win this fight. If he comes in with the bald look, it's Dusko. Dusko has experience being bald. He knows what it's like. He's been in the storm.
I think if it's bald Reese, that's it. We're super big beast, mega max, poi, pod, whatever you want. We're doing it all the acronyms.
All of it. Next up, my man, we got Ketlen Vieira taking on Maycee Chiasson. I did something I never do earlier today. I gave Maycee Chiasson credit for a beautiful takedown that she hit. I've always given this girl grief because I've seen some signs in the past that I thought she was a quitter, that I didn't think she was serious about getting into that action. Frankly, I still haven't forgiven her for the Reina Aldana fight. But just looking at the skill set, right? These women are about the same age. And I think if you had said 3 years ago, these women are going to fight, Ketlen Vieira would be a minus 400 favorite, right? Now you look at the line, it opened up for the last time they were booked to fight each other, and it was like minus 200 or so Ketlen. Now it's like a pick'em minus 120 Maycee. And I think it's just because the recent form has been Maycee looking like the best version of herself and Ketlen Vieira not looking very violent right? Like she just doesn't seem to have. We talk about sometimes on this show having hate in your heart or just going out there and being enthusiastic. And like Ketlen Vieira has been at extreme aggression and enthusiasm deficits for the last 5-7 fights in the UFC. Maycee Chiasson, on the other hand, I think has been showing her best form to date. You know, you look at that fight with Mayra Bueno Silva, she was taking shots, she was landing shots, she was not afraid to engage in a brawl. And when it came down to it, how did she win the fight? It was actually having better technique. She hits an overhook to an underhook drag, stepping outside trip. Bro, it's beautiful. It was shit that I do a lot, and I like to wrestle up her body, right? To try and drag people out of position. She's got a big frame. So she was able to leverage that against Mayra and pull her in with the overhook, step behind her, throw it with that deep right underhook. I was like, man, Maycee kind of knowing what she's doing here. Gets on top, stays in a safe position, stays smart. Her coach is saying no arm burst, no nothing. Staying squared up, doing everything right, holding wrists. Bam, folding elbow, fight's over. Like, that was really as simple as it was. Like, used a great amount of risk control, smart decision-making from the top position. Don't do too much. Just do enough. Smart offense. You don't have to throw 500 shots that get you tired and accomplish nothing when you could throw one shot that puts her in a fight-ending position, right? 1 or 2 elbows that are clean, unobstructed, could be all it takes to have somebody bleeding a crimson mask. Now you win the round. Now you win the fight. Ketlen Vieira, by the way, has seen this happen before. How about the Yana Kunitskaya fight? Anybody old enough to remember that one? Bro, she's better than Yana at everything. And she lost because she doesn't try hard enough, and she let the fight slip through her fingers, and she's not violent enough. And it's like, when I look at this fight, if you said to me, like, somebody wins by just completely outclassing the other on the ground, I would think it's Ketlen, just because, like, at her core, has real judo, has real jiu-jitsu credentials. But when it comes down to it, man, I don't think this girl is about that life when it comes to fighting, in terms of getting in there, me trading. When she got hit really hard by Irene Aldana, she got sat down by the left hook. Maycee was kind of dealing against Aldana. She was kind of whooping her ass, kick to the liver from the ground and goes down in a sack of potatoes. Couldn't believe it. Still never seen anything like it before in my life. Sniper got her from the outside. But when it's not that fight, right? Like, you take that fight out of the sample. Most of her recent fights, Maycee's looked pretty good. And she's looked like she's getting better. And Ketlen's looked like the opposite. And if you just said to me, like, this is about who's more enthusiastic, who wants it more, who's more violent, Maycee, right? Like, I think who's more skilled? Now we're having a different conversation. But, like, who is going to go out there and fight harder for your dollar? I do think it's Maycee Chiasson. And for those reasons, I think she was probably the side at plus money. At this point, I'm not going to, chase a minus 120 on a girl that I have been frustrated by in the past. We've seen her have a fight well within her grasp, blow it, right? So it's not to say Maycee's some reliable product that every time out, you know what you're going to get. But here's the thing that I'm looking at. If I was to play one prop on this fight, man, Maycee Chiasson KO is plus 850. And I'm like, I just saw her go out there and know the right thing to do to get a fight stopped. In WMMA, you could spend your whole life trying to knock women out, or you could put cuts on their face that get the fight stopped, right? Like that, just as far as I see it. If a woman is bleeding badly from her face, they're much more likely to stop the fight, in my view, than if a man is. Just generally speaking. Obvious examples to the contrary. Irene Aldana with a freaking sword slice through her face. There are notable exceptions, but just in general, like, if there's a woman taking prolonged ground and pound on the ground where no damage visibly has happened yet, they still stop the fight sometimes. So I think when you look at this matchup, I say to myself, who's more likely to initiate takedowns? I don't know. Like, I think it's kind of a 50-50, but if it's just a pure striking fight, I think Maycee's more confident and more aggressive. So I think she'll probably get the better of it, probably throw more numbers out there as well. More dangerous and voluminous, in her striking. I think Maycee gets the job done, man. Anything you want to add there, Wiz? What do you think about this ladies matchup?
This fight has, either going to be greasy split run all over it, or I think it's actually Maycee. And I'm more leaning towards the Maycee side. And pre-tape, I thought I was going to be on Maycee. Mid-tape, after taping Ketlen, I'm like, okay, there's some things to like, and there's a lot to dislike just based off current form. And then it really solidified the Maycee position after I taped her. And I think her striking has been very impressive. The way she's able to keep these ladies on the ends of her punches, and the damage she's doing from top position is something that I think she could take advantage of here. Now, where I think she might have an issue is if Ketlin's able to hold her against the cage. That's obviously going to be Ketlin's game plan and what she's looking for here. But I just struggle to see where Ketlin's going to be able to do that effectively for 15 minutes against someone who is going to be bigger than her for the first time and quite a bit. 3 inches of height and then 4 inches of reach on the Maycee side is something that I really like in this fight, just due to the fact that Ketlin's whole game is bullying these girls against the cage. So for all those reasons, I think I'm leaning towards the Maycee side. I haven't played anything yet there. I likely won't be betting anything on this fight. Just I do see a path where this could end up getting a little bit greasy, and if Ketlin does find success and hold Maycee against the cage, which part of me thinks she can just due to the lankier frame of Maycee, but also its recent form doesn't suggest anything promising. So yeah, not the greatest of reads here, but I do think it's Maycee.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, like losing to Kayla Harrison is not why I'm condemning Ketlen Vieira. It's going to a close-ish decision with Penny Kianzad. It's losing a split decision to Raquel. I know she was the champion, but frankly, like I think skill for skill, Ketlen's better than her. She just let the fight slip through her fingers again. Holly Holm, it was a split decision. I thought Ketlen won. The entire world thought I was an idiot. I had bet a lot of money on Ketlen. Maybe I was biased as a result, but ultimately I just thought Holly Holm kind of didn't do that much and did get beaten up in the clinch for large stretches in that fight. But it was a nothing burger fight. Like if it went the other way, I would have just had to cry in my coffee because again, Ketlen left it really close. Against Miesha Tate, guys, clear, she definitely won that fight. She beat the shit out of Miesha truly. But when you go back and look, she's reluctant about doing it. She's allowing Miesha to hang around. Like she's just not a girl who wants to go put a stamp on it, put you away, be aggressive, be assertive, let you know what time. None of that. She cried and apologized to Miesha after the fight because she was beating up one of her heroes. And it's like, maybe she'll not have that affinity for Maycee Chiasson, but it's just like, how can I trust you when you're in these big fights and you have the biggest opportunities of your career and you can't let it go and you don't want to? It's hard for me to get behind you. And the UFC, they're not giving you Kayla Harrison because they want to see you win the fight, right? Like, I just think right now they're not matchmaking her for success. I think meanwhile on the other side, Maycee goes out there, gets a win over Mayra Bueno Silva, who is just in a title opportunity. Now Ketlen Vieira is the stepping stone to a title opportunity, so to speak. We just saw that for Kayla Harrison, who's booked for the title at the next pay-per-view. So very excited to see how this division shakes out. It's been in dire straits for the last little while. Hopefully Kayla Harrison can reestablish some new dominance atop the division and maybe even woo Amanda Nunes back to claim her crown. But with that being said, let's move on to the next fight, my brother. We got Dustin Jacobe taking on Bruno Lopes in a 205-pound fight. And I think that if Bruno Lopes by sub at plus 900 does not cash, he is probably going to get fucked up in this fight more often than not. I do not trust Bruno Lopez' striking process. 32 years of age, so a little bit younger, a little bit less miles than Dustin Jacobe. But frankly, the guy's chin is not very reliable. His striking process, not very reliable. His win-loss record, a little bit better than it should be in all likelihood. He's had some fortunate runouts. People were extremely high on him when he first got to Contender Series. I said pump the brakes a little bit. I think Brenson Iberio, a kill-or-be-killed fighter, has a chance to beat this guy because he's not afraid and he's going to go throw. And then he hurt him bad and put him down. And when you look at that, Brenson Iberio is a very average guy at the UFC level. No disrespect to Brenson, but that's just the truth. And by the way, he was not a world beater before he got to the UFC, right? He was a guy who was a kill-or-be-killed type of journeyman that needs that one knockout to get to the UFC. And he did it. Hats off to him. They set up Bruno Lopez to fight Mikhail Sanziani and come out and look good. And he looked terrible again. And then they set him up against maybe the worst Dagestani fighter in the history of the UFC. No disrespect again. But Magomed Gadzhiesulov, we knew that guy was going to be fraudulent one day. We were like, this guy will get exposed one day. I just couldn't trust Bruno Lopez to be the guy. And of course, he gets the job done. So now I'm looking at this fight and I say, Bruno Lopes is an actual black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Dustin Jacobe's 1-2 career to the submission in meaningful fights, meaning the UFC, Bellator. He's 0-2 career to the submission. He never submitted anybody of note. He's been submitted twice. So if Bruno Lopes is going to win this fight, I feel like he has to make this about who is the better wrestler and grappler, which, by the way, we've seen Jacobe get beat up and taken down multiple times by Cutelaba, and then Cutelaba just spent everything he had trying to do that, right? So we know that it could be successful. It was a draw, right? He got a 10-8 round, but Jacobe survived and kept getting back into it. When you're 37, when you've been through some of these wars and been in these exchanges, sometimes you can't keep recovering, right? Alonzo Menefield basically landed 2 punches of note, won the decision because those were the 2 punches that mattered. I think Bruno Lopes needs something like that. Like, he either needs to meme him with like, oh, a huge shot at the end of the round, or he needs takedowns and a submission, because I just don't think that 15 minutes on the feet goes well for him. And I also think he probably gets knocked out if the fight stays on the feet for 8 minutes. So yeah, I just don't trust Bruno Lopes here. I do think he's got a chance to win by knockout. You can't rule it out completely. It's 205-pound men slinging leather, at each other's heads. People can hit the deck, but Jacobe's just better process, more dangerous, I feel. So ultimately, reluctant pick on Dustin Jacobe. I've never been a huge Dustin Jacobe guy, but I'm not a big Bruno Lopes guy either. And I think the way he wins this fight and looks like a live underdog is committing to a wrestling and grappling game plan. And the guy teaches Muay Thai classes and he really fancies himself a striker. I think it would be a massive mistake against Jacobe. So for me, the thing I'm looking at from a prop perspective that's not tied to a side, I don't expect this fight to go the distance. I think more often than not, if Bruno's not getting the grappling going, he's getting sparked. So for me, that's the way I'd look at this. Wiz, what do you think about this one, man? 2 big boys throwing down. Do you see it the same way? You think Dustin Jacobe is a level ahead, or do you think Bruno Lopes has something to offer here?
Let me try and sway you to be more in love with Jacobe here. Let's just break this down in terms of styles very quickly. You already mentioned it. Jacobe's going to be more of the striker here, and Lopes is, I'm not going to say a pure grappler, but obviously that's where he finds most of his success. On the feet, we saw in his last fight against Chiasson, he had nothing for him on the feet and only wanted to clinch against the cage because he knew that if that fight was in open space, he was getting sparked. And Jacobe, sure, not the best run as of late. Got the upset against Vitor Petrino. He realistically was on his way to losing a 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards there if he didn't find that 3rd round knockout, but he found the knockout. And I think Petrino is, with all due respect, maybe 10x the fighter Lopes is, for the sole reason, A, physicality, B, the striking, and then Petrino can also grapple himself. So I think he presents a much bigger threat than Lopes here. And if Jacobe is able to keep this fight on the feet, man, I think it's just any second waiting to happen for him to just spark Lopes. And the one thing I like about Jacobe is his get-up game is pretty decent. So I'm not worried too much if this fight does hit the mat. He is quite urgent when it comes to getting back up. Now, the one thing about Lopes is I do feel like if he does get this fight to the mat early, like round 1 specifically, he might find some success while they're dry. We all know it's a lot easier to keep fighters down when you're dry. But I just don't see a world where Lopes doesn't start to wilt. And the experience edge on the Jacobe side, strength of schedule altogether is night and day difference than what Lopes is used to facing. So it's just one of those fights where Jacobe has lost to the cream of the crop and is now facing someone much lower level than what he's used to. And I think he gets it done here at a -170 tag. I think it's kind of generous.
All right, fair enough. And apparently I was pronouncing Lopez's name wrong. I'll double check my pronunciations there. Obviously goes a little bit against phonetics, so that's on me. I normally write about those things, so I like to take a point of getting people's name right. So if I got that wrong, my apologies. Jamie, I think it's Jaime, but either way, thank you for the note, and I will double check my work there. In any case, I'm happy to move along to this next fight, my brother, where we got Ramiz Brahimaj taking on Billy Ray Goff. And I got to say, man, Ramiz knocking out Mickey Gall was not on my bingo card, right? The guy came out throwing a lot more aggressively than normal. And I did think he had a chance to go out there and mix it up in the grappling with Mickey. I wasn't super convicted on that fight. I just remember thinking Mickey probably would win. And then Ramiz absolutely sparked him. So hats off to Ramiz, right? kind of needed that win in a big way, went out there and got it in devastating fashion. I think that's the first TKO win of his career, now making him 1-1 to the TKO prop because he did get his ear burst open by Max Payne Griffin back in the day. So ultimately, Ramiz, up and down UFC career. I thought the Temba fight was a really bad look for, honestly, both guys. I'm a big fan of Temba, but Temba kind of just clinch stalled him against the fence, and Ramiz had very few answers, and that wasn't very good to see. I think when I look at Billy Ray, a guy who's intentional about his striking, but very reckless, very wild, takes a lot of chances. So I don't really know what to make of this fight. I'm kind of surprised that one guy's such a big favorite because I don't know that captures all the inherent volatility. But if you had to say who's in a better spot right now, the 26-year-old who hasn't had the major injuries and the setbacks, I would say Billy Ray Goff is probably in a better spot. But Ramiz has had more high-level experience, and he's grown up in the UFC. So I'm not sure exactly what to make of this fight. I still think Goff has big vulnerabilities. Wiz, we'll kick it to you, my man. What do you think about this one?
Not the most passionate take on this fight. Obviously, Billy Ray Goff is a fighter who is quite unpredictable in the way that he comes out to fight. His style of fighting is wild, and oftentimes when I'm watching his tape, a second I think he's about to get knocked out, and the second he ends up hurting someone. So with fighters like that, you just tend to, or at least myself, I tend to really just stay away altogether and wash my hands clean, just due to the sole fact that on any given night they can look hindsight huge favorite or hindsight huge underdog. With that being said, that obviously leans to me saying this is a dog or pass spot for Ramiz Brahimaj, who I believe his last camp was with the Valley Flow striking, which could translate to why he looked really good in terms of his striking output and overall just his hands and accuracy. I don't know if he's still there for this fight. I didn't do too much research onto his side here, but we already know in the grappling, I think he can mix it up well. But historically, Ramiz Brahimaj is someone who has been known to be a quitter. Someone who has lacked the physicality or the ability to keep up the physicality over a 3-round period. And Billy Ray Goff has shown that although he does get hurt in some fights, he can withstand it, and he has the dog in him, and he can put it on you late. In that Trey Waters fight, sure, he got pieced up a little bit, but really came on towards the end against someone who had a huge reach advantage against him. And it's really tricky to get offense off against guys like that, especially when you're not the most durable person in the world. So that was impressive. All that being said, I wouldn't lay the huge juice on Billy Ray Goff, although I do think he ends up winning this fight round 2, round 3. I would rather go Ramiz Brahimaj or pass, but I'm passing. I think that Goff's dog might be a little bit too much for Brahimaj here. But I'm willing to be proven wrong. We just haven't seen Brahimaj in the cage consistently over the past couple of years.
Absolutely true. Also wanted to say shout out Allison Chandler. We do not get all that many ladies in the building, so it's always a pleasure to have one here. And she says, first time here, enjoying the show. Thank you very much for watching. We appreciate you being here. Unless
you're a man, Allison, we don't discriminate against men named Allison either.
Absolutely. All love and support. But in any case, my brother, we got an interesting one here because I think Billy, watching back his film, he made good reads against Kinoshita. He did some smart things. He went with a hook to the body, didn't work, goes with a right hand to the body to follow it up, right? He went right hook, it got blocked. So then he goes right straight and puts Kinoshita down. And I think that Billy is a guy that really lives and dies by his offense, right? Like he goes out there, he needs to get some big moments, some big exchanges going, because when he's in these firefights, there's a lot of room for error, right? Like he's getting hurt, he's getting clipped, he just relies on that dog. And it is something that, over time becomes harder to do that, right? Especially against higher level opponents. Corey Sandhagen said again after the Marlon Chito Vera fight, if you remember, he was like, Marlon, he just wants to win so bad, and he thought that was going to be enough for his whole career. And he's like, but eventually it's not about who wants to win more. It's about who has more skills. And I do think that's where Ramiz came into the UFC, and he was a really good blue belt, which is like a horrible skill set to have for the UFC. You're like out there really aggressively trying to grapple. When you can't get it going, what are you really going to do to win fights, right? To your point, if he's at Valley Flow Striking Academy, working on his game, getting his hands up to snuff, maybe he could go out there and start Billy, right? And when I look at Ramiz, a 170-pound man who's coming off a knockout win via KO at 13-1, I'm always going to have to take a look at that, right? Like I got to take a close look at that. My guy MMA says, Liam, what belt are you? Blue belt. Thank you for asking, my friend. But I say that to say I'm not in the UFC, and thank goodness, right? When you look at where somebody's at, Ramiz comes into the UFC as a blue belt. Now he's gotten a lot more experience. So I don't know what belt rank he's at, and belts don't mean everything, right? You always got to watch and kind of have an understanding. But I think that when I watch Ramiz, he does seem like a guy who's very aggressive, very assertive with his grappling, but a lot of it's back takes and a lot of it kind of slows down if he can't get it going in that first maybe 7.5 minutes. So I think Billy has better cardio, probably takes over this fight the longer that it goes. But in the first round, I just think it's going to be kind of a slogger, a slobber knocker, a barn burner. It's going to be two guys taking a lot of chances, swinging big at each other. And I just think that if Billy gets hurt, Ramiz probably has the skill and technique to finish the fight. So that, especially early. So for me, I think both guys have the opportunity to finish. I'm going to be looking at maybe some unders and maybe some Ramiz KO, because the market width is huge as well. Like 13-1 plus 850, both on the board, right? Books don't know how to price Ramiz as a knockout artist coming off that last win. And maybe Mickey Gall is just there for the pickings or whatever. But I don't know. Mickey's always been a pretty tough guy and honestly a willing enough striker in the UFC. So I'm not totally sold that Ramiz is, done with his UFC career and phoning it in. He's 32. He's not, 39 or so, like, right? He's not past prime physically. If the guy's health is where it needs to be for a professional mixed martial arts career, I just think this fight plays out closer than the line. All right, my man. This might be the people's main event, right? I already gave you my main event, which was, Jafel Filho and Ali Nascimento. This might be the people's main event. Mateusz Gamrot, Leavitt, Klein, Wizz. We'll kick it off with you, my brother. What do you think about this fight? Two entertaining lightweights. Some people hate Gamrot for his takedown heavy style, but I think he's been in a lot of fun fights in the UFC, win and lose. So I'm kind of curious how this one plays out. What do you think, Wizz?
You said it yourself. The highlight of the sentence. Been in a lot of fun fights. And that's going to be something that I will harp back on. But yeah, Mateusz Gamrot, we know he wants to do. He's going to go out there and shoot a lot of takedowns and try to, out control you to win his fights more often than not. And Leavitt Klein is just someone who just brings it at every single minute. And that's the one thing that I love about his style. He's very aggressive. He throws hard. His cardio holds up over 3 rounds. Not great anywhere, but he's good in every department in MMA, whether it's defensively in terms of wrestling and striking, or offensively. He's able to get it done, which is not something that a lot of people can say. Now, Gamrot, where he lacks is the striking defense, and his striking is very meat and potatoes. It has gotten better over the years, but it's still a work in progress. Now, the big issue with Gamrot's striking defense is just the ability to take a punch doesn't seem to be there as much anymore, especially over his last few fights. It's been dropped, I believe it's been 5 times in his last 10 fights.
They don't even have an official stat on the Dan Hooker knockdown.
Yeah.
UFC stats tells me not to believe my lying eyes.
That's fucking nuts. So, so that's the big issue I have with Gamrot. I think if Klein lands a couple on his chin, he has the potential to hurt him, because Klein throws hard and he lands hard. We've seen Klein in multiple of his fights. He's landed, I think it's quite the opposite stat, 5 knockdowns in his last 10 fights. So it's just one thing going for Klein that just happens to be Gamrot's downfall. And I think winning the moments here is what's going to allow Klein to get ahead on the scorecards. Do I think he's going to finish Gamrot? I don't quite think so. But at this underdog pricing, I do think that Klein's going to be able to at least hurt Gamrot in one of the rounds and make this fight close and interesting for the judges to score. Will Gamrot land takedowns? Yeah, sure. I do think that he will land takedowns. We've seen Klein get taken down in the UFC quite a bit. But I think that Klein's ability to get back to his feet and his ability to dish out damage consistently over a 3-round period is what's going to win him this fight. I do see a world where Klein can hand Gamrot his. Is it going to be his first knockout loss? Yeah, it is. I do see a world where Klein serves him his first knockout loss on the platter here in this co-main event spot, and really announce himself as Mr. Highlight, as his nickname suggests. So, give me Ludovic Klein by knockout.
My man, very bold prediction, and I like where your head's at. I think both these guys are very impressive fighters for different reasons, and I'm super excited to talk about this fight. I got great questions in the chat. Ulysses is asking about the over 2.5. I will definitely talk about that over the course of this breakdown. Thank you very much. And a lot of other really smart commentary from the sharpest chat in the game. So thank you all so much for your thoughts. Now, let me share some of my thoughts. Mateusz Gamrot is outside of the MMA meta. And what I mean by that is most guys that you watch in MMA follow certain patterns, right? Where you can basically see like they're going to try and push you against the fence to wrap under your hips for a double leg, turn you sideways, go for it. It's very classic MMA stuff, right? The MMA meta is simply best practices applied over a broad swath of people. So if you're taking somebody from scratch and teaching them MMA, you're not going to teach them how to hit low single legs from space. You're going to teach them how to get a double leg against the fence because that's the highest percentage takedown for the average person. Mateusz Gamrot is not like that. He's a Polish wrestler by trade. He goes out there and shoots low single legs from half a mile away, and he's very, very good at them. And so you have to give Mateusz Gamrot a lot of credit and respect for having a unique game in MMA. Not a lot of guys do that in this day and age. And also being really, really proficient at one niche skill. Like that single leg, not a lot of guys do it. So how do I get looks in the training room where guys are just blasting low singles from 6 miles away? Very hard, right? So you go back and you look at that Dan Hooker fight. I was bullish on Dan Hooker going into that fight. You guys will remember I was very fired up about the result as well. I put out a pretentious video on Twitter about it. But I was detailed with my assessment why I thought Dan Hooker would win that fight. And it was multifaceted. And I believe every point that I brought up came into fruition. Meaning he shows defensive tools that make it a cost for you to shoot takedowns. He lifts knees. He throws kicks. When you are going to shoot takedowns, you'd rather go against a boxer, so to speak, where their feet are planted and I know where they are. A kicker, they're a lot more bouncy on the feet at times, right? And you hear, if you watch Ludovic Klein's fight, they talk about, I think it's Laura Sanko and Paul Felder have an exchange where they talk about the reason this guy is so good at sprawling, Ludovic Klein, is because his kicks are so good. And when you kick fast and you can move fast forward on a hip hinge, you can do the same thing backwards on a hip hinge. Very interesting, right? And when you look at Gamrot, the ways that you got to get to him, and Hooker is a absolute masterclass in how to beat Mateusz Gamrot. You need to hurt him on the feet. You need to get respect so he cannot shoot for free. You need to throw things that are intercepting up the middle, whether they are uppercuts, knees, kicks. Because if you don't do that, he is going to just keep taking free straight line attacks on you all day. We look at RDA. He did a lot of the right game plan early, and then it all fell apart in rounds 2 and 3 because he's old. Right? And no disrespect, but if you take RDA in his prime, I think he would have absolutely smashed Gamrot in that fight. And my evidence is he was a lesser version of himself and lost a 29-28 where he basically just got out wrestled and out hustled. You go back and look who did the damage in that fight early. Mateusz Gamrot was hurt bad. He got kneed right in the head. And it was because RDA, good sense of timing, knee to the head as he came in. Beautiful. And I called that exact strike in my write-up. So when you go back and look, I have been waiting for Gamrot to get knocked out, and it keeps not happening. He's a tough bastard. Gamer, super appropriate nickname, guys. He gets dropped with a knee, and he just starts shooting takedowns again. The guy is relentless. My problem is, when you look at that Hooker fight, the one detail that Klein doesn't have that Hooker had is he has guillotines. Hooker made him pay every time. You want to shoot your head down here? I'm going to try and squeeze your head off every time. And by the way, they don't call him Hangman for no reason. He knows how to do the techniques. If you put your head in a full guillotine, he will go full guard and close the show, right? That's Dan Hooker. He's done it to multiple guys before, right? Also, he can do it standing. He can get that guillotine and he's got height, leverage. He can lift you. Standing guillotine. So Mateusz Gamrot, much like Benoit Saint-Denis against Dustin Poirier, put his head in the hole a lot of times, and that's exhausting, guys. Even if you can defend guillotines, yeah, you're a really good grappler. You defend the guillotine. It's exhausting. And if it's ninja chokes, You got to hit hard, explosive rolls to get, it's like, how many of those do you have in you, right? 34 years of age for Mateusz Gamrot. I don't think he's going to get in those contentious guillotine situations here. So then what is the dynamic? I think Ludovic Klein has some of the best takedown defense I've taped. It's going to meet the hardest resistance in this fight, right? Gamrot is not traditional with his wrestling attempts, so it's going to be harder. And he's very, very good at it. And he's very voluminous in his attacks, so he will keep doing it. Ludovic Klein has to be very sharp over the course of this fight to win it. But when you look at how his skills match up, when I have seen guys go to single legs, it's few and far between. Most guys go to double legs. Even when guys go to double legs, Ludovic tries to force them to single legs. He prefers to defend single legs. A low single, if you guys are not familiar with wrestling parlance, that's okay. I'm a nerd. I'm a wrestling coach. When you talk about low singles, we're talking about head is on the inside more often than not, right? Sometimes people take a head to the, more often than not. You're looking for your head to the inside of their knee. You're looking for two hands on their ankle. You're looking for a way to break them down over that knee and control them. You'll see Mateusz Gamrot, he's excellent at skirting his hips around people while he's doing this. He's an expert at the single leg. Let's just call it that way. But when you watch Ludovic Klein, he not only has a beautiful limp leg out of a single, which he's hit in multiple fights, including the Mason Jones fight. If you want an example against a guy with judo, Mason Jones tried basically every takedown he could think of in that fight at different points. He went for upper body throws, gave up his back. He went for traditional double leg takedowns, ended up in the bottom position. He went for a single off the fence, ended up getting punched in the face several times for it. It's like Ludovic Klein makes people pay for wrestling as well. You shoot a shitty takedown on Ludovic Klein, he goes full chest wrap, gripping around the hand, spins his hips down to the ground. Now you're underneath. He looks for front headlocks. He goes to spin behind people. He makes grapplers and wrestlers pay. He shoots explosively through people. When he goes for his wrestling is quite good. So in a lot of ways, I think Ludovic Klein is an excellent wrestler. This is the hardest wrestler he's ever fought, though. Something's got to give, right? Rubber's going to meet the road here. Then you look at, all right, how does this play out on the feet? I thought maybe one of the worst bets I've ever placed in my life, right? Because I go back and look at all my old bets. Shane Young against Ludovic Klein, bottom 5 all time, right? It's certainly a really bad bet. Another really horrible bet, Mateusz Gamrot minus 2XX against Beneil Dariush. I was so sure. I was like, Benny is slower. He's going to get taken down. Like I just had in my head a clear vision of the fight where I'm like, there'll be scrambles, it'll be great, but like eventually Benny's going to get taken down. And even if not, I was like, Gamrot, he's going to just do more on the feet. He's going to throw more. He's going to make this guy exhausted. Benny always looks like he's ready to get exhausted 7 minutes into a fight. It's unbelievable that he has like good cardio, but also looks like he's ready to have, cardiac arrest at the 7-minute mark. He does both. Only certain people can do this, right? Then you look at how the fight plays out, and the southpaw striking of Beneil Dariush gave him problems, right? And then in the third round, the round that Gamrot needed to win basically for his career, right? Like title shot on the other side of this. Huge left hand, sits him down. And honestly, it was a minor miracle he got back up from that. Beneil Dariush hit him so hard, it sounded like a gunshot, guys. Like loaded up a slow motion left hand with a softball, right? He did the softball rotator and detonated on the chin of Gamrot. Gamrot got back up. He kept trying to wrestle. He's a tough bastard, but he lost the fight in that moment. It was already over, right? Ludovic Klein is a devastating southpaw. When you look at what he does really, really well, he throws the southpaw double attack frequently. What is the southpaw double attack? My guy Wiz knows, obviously, but the left and the left, right? It's both of them. So if you keep both hands up, I will punish you by kicking as hard as I can across both your arms, which will still rattle your brain. And if you don't, I'm just going to come straight through the middle and hit you with the left hand, which is my power shot. So Ludovic has a decent jab, but he does not overcommit to his jab because he knows this one's not going to get the job done. This one will get the job done. So he throws out the jab, he prods, he throws kicks to the body, he mixes it up a little bit. By the way, that lead hand, if you don't start reacting to that, he will rip it down to the body if you go 2 hands too high. So I think Klein is excellent at punishing people's defensive reactions. His striking is not very high volume, which is what people will criticize about him. But this is why, in my opinion, tape study matters. Because looking at his stat lines, I was not super thrilled about some of the stuff I was seeing. I was like, man, this could be a problem. The one fight I still have to go back and watch is the Jai Herbert fight, which I know is going to have some bad footage that I'll be concerned about. When I look at Ludovic Klein, I think he gets better over time. I think his skills have rapidly improved over the course of his UFC tenure. He's 30 years of age. The guy looks like he is sauced to the absolute tits. Both these guys are on drugs, in my opinion, but like Ludovic Klein is like dialed, right? Like my man went from featherweight to lightweight, getting on the right supplementation. You feel me? And you look at where he's at. He used to gas out worse than he does now. That Thiago Moises fight, he goes out there, he hurts Thiago badly early. He comes out in the second round. He's winning the round cleanly. Thiago tries to wrestle, and not only does he defend all the wrestling easily, he takes Thiago down and beats him up on the ground, defends a knee bar attempt, gets back on top. You're like, holy shit, like this guy is a better fighter than he used to be, right? I look at this fight and I say to myself, I see Ludovic Klein as having a real chance to win this fight via knockout or via decision. Like, I think that he is a powerful striker. I think he has the capability of knocking out Gamrot, who I think can get hurt by a lot of opponents, right? We've seen RDA hurt him bad. Dan Hooker hurt him bad. How many times can you keep getting away with it? I don't know. Then you say to yourself, okay, on the Gamrot side, Gamrot by sub is like, again, like 9-1 or something. And it's like, if Gamrot looks like a favorite in this fight, how is that price going to be accurate? Because like, again, maybe he just goes out there and throws a little bit more volume and like gets it. Maybe, but like, I'm not convinced about that. Like Gamrot's not the highest volume guy you've ever seen. High volume takedowns, sure. High volume striking, it's a little bit hit and miss at times. Like the guy is not going to go out there and throw 500 significant strikes every fight. He's more likely to attempt 20 takedowns than to land, 250 significant strikes or something, right? So I look at Gamrot and I'm like, if he gets tons of takedowns in top time, maybe he looks like a massive favorite. Because like Ludovic Klein, the thing he's done really well is D up takedowns. But when you get into extended grappling exchanges with guys that know how to grapple, right? Gamrot competed at the ADCC's 5-0 career to the submission. He's no punk on the mat. Ludovic Klein has been submitted before, right? It's been a while. It was outside the UFC, but he's been submitted before. And I believe even he was submitted once in the UFC. Am I remembering correctly? So the guy has been submitted pre-UFC, problem. Got submitted in the UFC. Mateus Gamrot is probably the best submission grappler on paper that he's fought, except for maybe Thiago Moises. And the difference there is Thiago Moises is not as good a wrestler, purely, as a guy like Mateus Gamrot. So I think that this is an interesting fight, compelling fight. I do think it's a dog or pass situation. I know guys I really respect that are on the Gamrot side here. If he gets consistent takedowns, I'll feel a little foolish. But guys, I am a wrestling coach, and there ain't much I would have coached Klein to do different on a lot of his takedown defense. Like, he's just doing things right, pushing the head down and away from the lever, right? Forcing guys to grab two hands on one, then he's punching them in the face, right? Which I used to say, Derek Brunson, Jose Aldo, what were they really good at? Getting you to wrestle and then punching you. And then when you start trying to punch them back, they wrestle you or they get out of the way. And it's just a really good way of fighting. Like, Ludovic Klein does enough to win, but he's hurting all these guys. Like, all these guys get hurt. He just does not overexert himself when he does not need to. He's like, all right, I won this round. So he just hangs out on top. I'd like to see him develop better finishing instincts. Because again, against guys like Gamrot, you don't want to leave guys hanging around. They could come back and win round 2. They could come back and win round 3. But Thiago Moises, I just thought that the guy was never more composed than he was in that fight. I think Moises is a manageable challenge if you're a good fighter. I think, truthfully, that Jared Gordon knockout, as much as I credit Jared Gordon, that was beautiful, sensational, there's nothing you could take away from his performance. But I think he was softened up by Ludovic Klein, bro. Like, Ludovic beat the shit out of that guy really bad on rewatch, hurt him so bad in the first round. Thiago Moises had to be tough to stay in the fight, and then hurt him again really badly. But there was like 30 seconds left, so he kind of just like looked at the ref like, you're not going to stop it? All right, I'll just hold on and be done with it. But I just feel like that was the most complete Ludovic Klein performance I've ever seen. The guy has a ton of wins by finish, 17 wins by finish as a professional. So he's extremely dangerous. The guy's getting better all the time. He's 30. He looks like he's juiced to the tits. He's not easy to take down. And I think that he's the more dangerous and devastating striker on the feet. So for me, dogger pass situation, but the acknowledgement on the other side, Gamrot has fought a much better level of competition. He's proven that he could beat good fighters. But a lot of times it's close, thin margins, right? Frankly, Mateus Gamrot should be submitting Jalen Turner. It was a short notice fight, but if he's who I think he should be submitting that guy, right? We kind of seen what just happened with Jalen against Ignacio. It was like a little bit of a mental thing, but it was also like the guy puts himself in bad situations on the ground. We saw it against Matt Furvola however many years ago, right? So he's getting better, and I would love to see him come back. I think he made some rumblings about getting back in the gym. I'd love to see Jalen Turner come back, but that fight, was like another case study in Mateusz Gamrot just not always putting up the performances you expect from the guy, right? And he took that one on short notice. You can make the caveats, but it's like, who is he ultimately submitting in the UFC? Not very good guys. And when I go back and look at Klein's footage, if Gamrot by sub is 9-1, then Klein's probably the side in this fight. Like, and if that's a sincere price, you know what I mean? Like, if it's accurately 9-1, then that means Gamrot's not getting a ton of control. And if he's not getting a ton of control, it's like, I just think Klein is a guy who's more dangerous and very effective in his fighting. So, fun fight, good scrap, better gym. It may be for Mateusz as well, but I think Ludovic Klein, not just because he's a doppelganger, as some people say in the chat, but I just think the guy's pretty damn legit. Really good run since going to the lightweight division. And some of these wins are aging okay, right? Where guys are, coming back to the UFC like Mason Jones and things like that, where at first you wanted to hold it against him. And now Ludovic Klein's, body of work is starting to age all right. So I don't think Ludovic Klein's a bad fighter by any means or in any position. I think that if he can avoid getting summarily out-grappled in this one, he's going to compete, at a pick'em type price. So. All right, man. That's the main event of the evening. Up next, Erin Blanchfield, Coldblooded, taking on Maycee Barber, the future. Both these women are on the right side of 30. Both these women have, a lot of UFC wins under their belt already. So now it's about who's going to take that ultimate step forward, try and become a title challenger in this division. Erin Blanchfield got set back by that fight against Manon Fiorot. We've seen Manon Fiorot can compete with the top end of this division. She went out there, lost to 48-47 to Valentina Shevchenko, but she was on the losing end of that title fight. And Erin Blanchfield wants to be a world champion. So got to make skill improvements, got to get better over time, and showed a better product last time out, but still needed to get, some late takedowns and, needed to control some positions, needed to take over with the volume and stuff down the stretch. And I think against Maycee, I don't know how this cardio dynamic plays because Maycee's never really been tested over 5 rounds. She looks like a well-conditioned athlete, but she's been out of competition for a while as well. So I'm curious, my man Wizz, what do you think about this fight? Big dog in Maycee Barber in this main event. It says plus 140 on the screen. We're looking at closer to plus 200 across the market right now. So do you agree with the line movement? Do you think Erin Blanchfield gets the job done here? Or do you like the future Maycee Barber?
Look, I've always been one to criticize Erin in performances just because I in the beginning used to see her as just very one-dimensional, and I still kind of think she is quite one-dimensional with the wrestling and grappling. On the feet, she doesn't really pose too much threats, and that's kind of why I max bet Manon Fiorot against her. I was fairly confident that Fiorot's physicality was going to be able to not out grapple. I think that's the wrong term, but out wrestle in terms of defense when it comes to Erin. Because when Erin shoots, she doesn't shoot the most powerful shots. She's more of a jiu-jitsu girl rather than a wrestler. She's a jiu-jitsu girl that has a couple of takedowns in her pocket, is how I would like to classify it. And I just didn't think that she would be able to take Manon down, and I'm glad I was right. Now, in this fight against Maycee, a fighter who maybe hasn't been tested all that much in terms of cardio, in terms of strength of competition. But for me, I just think that at this line, I think we're getting to a point where it's starting to get really wide. So I'm waiting to see where this line starts to creep into as we get closer and closer to Saturday. I also want to see how weigh-ins look because Maycee, if there's one thing that we can count on, is she's always going to be in great shape, and she comes in there very lean and muscular, whereas Erin, I hate to say it, but she looks like she could cut an extra like 5 pounds on the scale. So she's not the most in shape fighter, I would like to call her, or the most athletic fighter, but she makes up for it in skill. On the mat, I think it's Erin all day. That's needless to say. But on the feet, I think Maycee can really do some damage on Erin. But the difference in this fight compared to the Manon Fiorot fight is that Erin doesn't have to get through all that range to get to Barber, whereas against Manon, she really had to get past those side kicks and all of the length that Manon had against her. So I think this might be a little bit easier of a fight for her to get it to the ground. But am I confident in her abilities to wrestle? I still have not seen her shoot takedowns effectively. So for me, I'm gonna have to say it's dog or pass here, but more than likely passing unless the line blows up a little bit more. I do think that Erin is, if I'm picking a winner, it would probably be Erin, but I just cannot lay the chalk on her here until she proves to me that A, her striking has improved, and then B, her wrestling has improved. Because without wrestling, her grappling almost negates itself, because taking these girls down in the first place is the hard part. And then if you don't have the striking to pair with it, it's almost going to be a little bit too predictable. And that's kind of how Manon was able to fend off the takedowns. Everything was coming from a mile out, and she was able to read it coming on from the inside of the takedowns. So it just spells one of those things where where Erin can just get stuck in her career. If she's able to work on the takedowns and show improved striking game, I think she can, maybe go for another run at the belt here. But let's see. I think this is more of a I want to get some info kind of fight than anything.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to note here is Erin Blanchfield got to the UFC back in 2021. And you look at Maycee Barber on the other side. She's been signed with the UFC since all the way back in 2018. And she won on the Contender Series in 2018 in July. So ultimately, Maycee Barber's been around for a while, right? Got some more wins in the UFC as a result. But lately, been a little less active. Had some health concerns, had some other things go on outside the cage. And so I do always have some question marks coming in. One thing that jumps out at me, I had noticed this about the Marina Rodriguez matchup where, shout out to her. She just retired, called it a career. But before that fight, I had basically said it was the unstoppable force, Jillian Robertson, who gets takedowns basically every fight against the movable object, right? Like a girl who just gets taken down in all of her fights. And that was basically Marina Rodriguez's problem from the day she got to the UFC to the day she left. If you wanted to take her down, if you had good takedowns, if you had a good top game, you could take her down, you could hold her down. There's very little she could do to stop you. When you look at, where we see this fight, Maycee Barber is a little too easy to get taken down for my liking. That is the one major concern here, because I do believe Erin Blanchfield has 4 special things about her game. Her cardio is excellent. Right. So you had talked about maybe her musculature, her physique isn't blow you away, but her cardio is sensational, in my opinion. Shows up, was getting beat up by Manon Fiorot and still enthusiastically pushing forward for 5 rounds. So I just think that shows somebody who shows up in shape. She's coachable. Her coaches are calling for her to do these things, go forward, attempt strikes, do this. She tried. She just didn't have it. Right. It's like physically, technically that neck, she didn't have the tools required to beat Fiorot, but she tried the whole time. So tenacity, cardio, grappling, pace. The rest is where there's still hot and cold parts of Erin Blanchfield for me, because I do think she's a little bit, hittable on the feet. She has decent defense, but she kind of stays in exchanges. She's not the fastest. She's a little bit too willing to be on offense, so she'll take shots coming back. And she wore some damage in that Fiorot fight, but Fiorot, not always the heaviest-handed woman, normally relies on that decision, that, pop, keep you at distance. I don't think Erin could get her respect. And for me, that's the big danger in this fight. Maycee Barber is not that talented in terms of her skills. We've definitely seen lesser women go out there and put it on her a little bit, but she's got that heart. She's got that tenacity. She's hard to put away. She's durable, and she's physical. Against Amanda Ribas, I really liked Maycee because I was like, dude, she's going to hit Amanda way too hard. And if Amanda's not able to summarily outgrapple her, it's going to be a problem. And in the first round, Amanda's doing well, much like the Marina Rodriguez fight. When she wasn't, it went bad really fast. And I think that for Erin, it's not like that, because she can take a punch better than Amanda. But I also think she's going to take a lot of punches if she just stays on the feet in this fight. I think she's a little faster. I think she's even maybe a little more clever with her strikes. I know that might get me laughed out of the room, but when you look at Maycee, what she's doing, a lot of times it's like loading up power shots. She's done a little bit better at getting, within herself in her striking in the Ribas fight in round 2, kind of stayed a little bit more composed. But a lot of times, bro, it's like she just starts swanging them things. You know what I mean? There isn't a great, it's just swinging hard. And a lot of women can't hurt people when they do that. which is why they don't do that. They try and stick behind careful jab. She can actually hurt people. So she doesn't have a lot of knockdowns, but she's bloodying up their faces. She's making them react poorly to shots. And Erin normally can just no-sell people's offense, right? Comes forward, keeps going. Manon Fiorot, if anything, was just frustrated by the fact that she couldn't get Erin to stop coming forward. Like by the 5th round, she was kind of like, all right, like, getting backed up a little bit more. Erin was having more success in the striking just from trying, right? But the only wrestling and grappling success that was had by Erin in that fight was when her opponent tried to grapple her and put herself in a guillotine situation and then never did it again. For me, Erin isn't super reliable with her takedowns. So I would make her a -150 here because Maycee is reliably getting taken down in her fights, but I just don't know where to place this fight because the number one thing that I think held back Erin Blanchfield against Manon Fiorot was physicality. And they gave her another one of the most physical women in the division. So for me, both girls on the right side of 30, but one of them's been around for a little bit longer. One of them's probably a little bit more of a natural fit for this division at 125 and kind of needs to go right now. And that's Maycee Barber. So for me, it's a dog or pass situation. I'm rooting for Erin Blanchfield. I'm going to pick her to get the win reluctantly here, but I'm going to do a lot more deep tape study on this fight to figure out if I think Maycee is getting taken down here consistently. Because if she is, it's not going to be a fight that she wins. I do think Erin's grappling is sensational and much higher level than the average woman in the UFC. But if you can't get the fight to the ground, your grappling isn't a big factor. And if she can't get Maycee to the ground consistently, I do think Maycee is the heavier-handed woman. So I don't think she'll outland Erin Blanchfield necessarily over the course of 25 minutes. But I think she will probably land the more meaningful shots and certainly compete if the fight goes to the scorecard. So for me, Maycee Barber probably reluctant click or pass in this situation. So that is all I got for you guys on the main event. I want to say God bless and good luck no matter how you're targeting any of these fights. Appreciate everybody for the support, everybody rocking with us. I know it's late for myself. I know it's late for my brother Wizz on the other side as well of the coast. So brother, tell the people where they can find you, anything that you've got going on, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you all for being active in the chat today. Thank you, Liam, for having me on as always, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the breakdowns. You can find me at Wizz MMA everywhere. And yeah, I have my link tree on my bio and Twitter. That's where you would find my Instagram. That's the only other thing that's not Wizz MMA. So anything else, you guys can DM me if you want some more just insight on picks or just my take on something specific. I'll be more than happy to respond. But another good show. Looking forward to next week's pay-per-view.
Absolutely, brother. And I wanted to say, last few weeks, we have been absolutely crushing it. So, I think year to date, I'm up like 13 units at a 40 some odd percent ROI. I'll double check all these facts and make sure it's posted up on Twitter and everything. But slow and steady. That's the process I believe in. I don't fucking fly out 50 units every week. I've been on both sides of the coin, right? So I judge nobody, but I've been a super aggressive aggro every bet, every fight, and it's a very emotionally volatile situation. Whereas now I live with the results, right? I put out a smaller betting slate, live with the results, but thankfully it's been doing well for us lately. Del Valle inside the distance plus 135, ends by sub plus 400, fight not to go minus 115. Cash them all in the first round easily for free. Exactly how we wrote it up. So Lord willing, we'll keep doing more of that, but we're never going to force it. Always one event at a time. I'm excited for UFC 316. We will be there for UFC Vegas 107. I appreciate all you guys for being here. Thank you to Green King. Thank you to Gamblestein. Thank you to KDO. Thank you to Cade Garrison and everybody else that made themselves known. Sharpest chat in the game. If you guys have more that you want to say, hit me up in the comment section down below. I try to get back to everybody as much as I can before fight time. God bless. Good luck. Enjoy those fights and come back next time. We're having all the same fun again next week. Thanks, everybody.